Thank you very much. So yes, my name is Sandjai Bhulai. I'm a mathematician, and usually when I say that, the temperature drops like 1 or 2 degrees in the audience. But I mean, you chose to come here, right? So yes, well, welcome. So mathematics can save your life, right? And I think it can do much more than that. But I think, well, if I talk about mathematics, I would say mathematics is like oxygen, right? You cannot see it, but certainly you cannot do without it, right? And so in my daily practice, I work with a lot of companies, and everywhere where I go, I see that mathematics is very useful there, right? And today I want to take you on a journey where you can see how mathematics really can help optimize emergency services, how you can catch criminals with mathematics, how it can make your life easier, safer, and better, right? So normally how I work is I usually start with a lot of data, and data is about us, about people, how things work, and then usually we get some insights and predictions from the data. And once we have those insights and predictions, we try to optimize all kinds of processes. And you can attach fancy names to it, data mining, machine learning, artificial intelligence. I just call it mathematics, okay? So, yeah, thank you. So, one of the first examples that I want to show you, it works the other way around, is ambulance services in the Netherlands. So, how does that work? So, in the Netherlands, we have different kind of calls. So, if something happens, you call 112, and if it's life-threatening, then we have an agreement that the ambulance should be there on your doorstep within 15 minutes. And we call that an A1 call. If it is urgent, but it's not life-threatening, then the agreement is that it should be there within 30 minutes. That's what we call A2 calls, and there are also called B calls. And these are transport of patients from one hospital to the other hospital. So these are planned transports. But it's really the A1 calls that are important, because the government places all kinds of restrictions on these ambulance providers. So they have an agreement that says, well, 95% of these A1 calls should have a response within these 15 minutes. And if you don't meet that target, well, it will have financial consequences. Yeah? So, of course, the solution is easy. Yeah, just have a lot of ambulances, right? But remember, an ambulance is a heavy equipment vehicle, which easily costs up to 1 million euros, if not more. So that's not an option, right? So, and if you look at the trend in the Netherlands, we have around 1 million calls, which are A1 calls. Well, actually, A1 and A2 calls, and half of them is A1, right? So around 500,000. And actually, 7% of those are not meeting the target. So basically, it's violating the norms that the government puts on these ambulance services. Yeah. So you need to do something about that. Well, as I said, you can buy more ambulances, but that's a very hefty investment. And also, if you look at, well, demographics and the demand for ambulances, it's growing. So if you don't do anything, yeah, you're not meeting the target. And so certainly you will not meet the target in future. So you have to do something, right? So a while ago, we were approached by these ambulance services together with our team. We looked at, well, can we do something smart with those ambulances without just expanding the fleet of ambulances, right? So with the same resources, providing better service. And of course, as I said, we start with data. So we basically made mathematical models where we first did prediction based on data, and then we did optimization. Well, I'll tell you how that works. So, well, of course, we don't have a glass ball. That would be easy if you could predict where the next, let's say, incident is going to happen. But actually, data is very clear about this. Yeah, I mean, in the morning, around the A10, the ring around Amsterdam, the probability that something is going to happen is much higher, right? So also, weather conditions also lead to higher probability of incidence. So what we did is we looked at all, the map, the map of Amsterdam or some other area. We gathered some past data, and we looked at all these incidents that are happening. And we made a probability model that tells you, well, at this time of day, under these weather conditions, the probability of having an incident there, well, will be higher or lower. So that gives you information about, well, where it's likely that the next incident is going to happen. Well, and then it becomes a chess game. Yeah? So here is a situation where you see the Flevoland, and suppose, for example, that we have two ambulances, one in Almere and one in Lelystad. Yeah, the way it works is that, well, these ambulances, let's say, in a stylistic setting, these circles represent the area in which they can reach an incident within 15 minutes. Yeah? Of course, this is not true in practice. Yeah? In practice, the infrastructure determines the shape of these circles. But let's, for this simple example, assume that the range in which you can handle incidents within 15 minutes is this circle. Now, suppose that an incident happens there. So what happens now is that, well, you call 112, an incident happened, and then they look at the available ambulances, and then they send the closest idle ambulance, which seems like a good idea, right? But if you are going to study that mathematically, it turns out to be not the smartest way to go for. Because here, in this case, you see that A and B can reach this incident within 15 minutes. That's fine. So normally you would say B is closer to the incident than A, so let's send ambulance B there. But if you can predict, and that's where the probability model comes into play, that the next incident is going to happen there, well, B is busy. So ambulance A has to go there, but it's outside its circle. So that means that this ambulance now won't meet the target requirement of 15 minutes. Yeah? So what a better solution would be is that B would not go to the closest incident, but A would go there. Yes, the driving time is a little bit longer, but it's still within 15 minutes. And then B is reserved for the next incident. But in order to do that, you need to be able to look ahead statistically, right? So that's what we do. So let's take a more complicated setting, which is a more realistic setting. So Flevoland indeed has 7 ambulances. So this is quite realistic. 2 are stationed in Almere, 1 in Lelystad, 1 in Zeewolde, 1 in Dronten, 1 in Urk, and 1 in Emmeloord. Yeah? So what we also did is that, okay, if we can make predictions, we can also let ambulances drive without even having a 112 call. Because if you can predict that something is going to happen somewhere, maybe they should get closer to the incident. So typically in Flevoland, Almere and Lelystad, the biggest cities, will have a higher probability of having incidents. So suppose that an incident happens in Almere. Well, now it makes sense, since there are 2 ambulances there, to send 1 of them there. But then you can see that the coverage of Almere is going down. So then it makes sense that the 1 ambulance in Zeewolde moves closer to Almere without even having had a call, right? And so now suppose that a second incident happens in Almere. Yeah? So there are now this 1 ambulance in Almere and 1, well, close by. So you send that ambulance to the incident, but then the one that went to Almere from Zeewolde now moves to Almere because there's no coverage in Almere anymore, right? So this is quite a new concept where you say, okay, let the ambulances drive without even having an incident, because normally they were very reactive. Yeah, so they would wait for a call, yeah, and if a call would occur, they would assign an ambulance to it. So you can imagine that if now something happens in Lelystad, then, well, the one from Dronten moves closer to Lelystad, but actually, you can, well, Dronten is also a bigger city, so actually the one from Urk should move to Dronten. Yeah? So these are well, it's really like a chess game. You look ahead to see what's going to happen and then move the ambulances accordingly. So what is the effect of this? Well, the effect of this is that you can really save a lot of time in reaching the incident. Yeah? But of course, you can imagine that, well, stopping your ambulance somewhere in the midst of the highway is not a nice place to stop. Certainly not in the evening, right? You don't have maybe any sanitary facilities. Well, you like to drink coffee while you wait for an incident, right? So you don't have any coffee. So, it doesn't feel right to stop there. So when we introduced this concept, we saved a lot of, let's say, driving time. But, well, the ambulance personnel basically said to us, wow, are we really going to do this? So we put that into the model. We said, okay, every time you relocate, in the model we said you'll get a penalty. Yeah? And we don't want to have the penalty, so then the model, if you put a high penalty, the model would be very cautious to move ambulances without having a call. And what you'll see is that, well, if you calculate stuff, you'll see that, well, if you see on the x-axis we have the relocations per day. So a lot of relocations mean that the late arrivals go down. Yeah, that's what this picture says. But you see that it has a very steep curve. So already a few relocations per day helps a lot. And then every additional relocation has a diminishing effect. So you don't need to relocate all the day, all your ambulances. But, well, it's basically like the 80-20 rule, right? A little bit goes a long way. So that's what we implemented. So basically, we implemented this, and it's now in a company called Stockhorst Emergency, and you can see our display there. So every time a call comes in, yeah, the system just calculates where these ambulances are. Well, tries to make a prediction of the future, yeah, and basically assigns all these ambulances on this display. And already half of the Netherlands is running on this algorithm now. Yeah, so the ambulances in Amsterdam are running on a basic version of this algorithm. Yeah. So that's very nice. But you can use the same model for firefighting, because also firefighters have some norms that they have to fulfill. Only this time, we got a different question from the firefighters. They said, okay, we can move through Amsterdam, but basically, we want to know if our buildings, where the ambulances are posted, yeah, is in the right place. And, well, ambulance is a little bit more trickier because, well, if you think of ambulances, yeah, there's only one type of ambulance. Yeah? So in the future, we want to also have light ambulances, which have fewer equipment in there. But if you think of, well, the firefighters, you see that they have different trucks. They have like fully loaded trucks with all the equipment to handle big fires, but they also have motorcycles, these vans with less equipment. They even have boats, right? So it's not only which vehicle am I going to send to an incident, but also what type of vehicle. Yeah. But basically, the situation is that if you look at Amsterdam, Amsterdam also, in terms of infrastructure, has developed. So maybe a location for the firefighter that was optimal in the past is not optimal now, right? So they were thinking like, okay, we have all these stations where our firefighters are located. Are these in the right place? So, well, maybe it's nice to show you a little bit. You don't have to understand it, but to show how my world looks like, right? So I'm going to show you a little bit of math. Yeah, so don't worry. I'm not going to explain that, but so the way we work is that, well, here you see Amsterdam, and all these stars are basically locations where the stations are located in Amsterdam. So first of all, what we try to do, well, mathematics is just a language in some sense, right? So we try to write down the problem in mathematical terms because that's more precise for us. And also, that's also closer to making computations on a computer, right? And also that helps us to ask the right questions, because if I write down an equation, to me it means a lot. I need to make all kinds of assumptions, and I want to test those assumptions with the people that have the problem. So basically what we do, and so, okay, brace yourself. In order to solve the problem, this is the mathematical problem. And actually, the whole problem fits on one slide. Well, how elegant is that, right? It's a realistic problem, and we really solved exactly this problem. So in mathematics, it's just one slide, but the implications it has for practice, it's enormous, right? So what happened? So actually, out of the 19 locations, it turned out that our model said, well, you have to move 4 of these locations. Well, now moving an ambulance is easy, but moving a building, that's a different kind of story. But actually, they did follow up on our advice. So they really moved those 4 buildings, and we received a letter of the commander. And in this letter, the commander says, okay, we really moved those buildings, and we really saw a big improvement in our late arrivals. So, well, how flattering is that for a mathematician that if we say, well, move a building, move a station, they do it, and also it works, right? So that's very nice. And then you can also say, okay, well, if you've done the ambulance and you've done the firefighters, why not go to the police, right? So we did. And the police has the same issue. They have vehicles, resources, they have to be placed at the right locations. We have data about, well, burglars, and we can do the data analysis on that. And there are clear patterns. So, well, burglars also have a systematic way of doing burglary. Yeah, so in the data you can see that if they are successful in one area, they quickly do it in another house in the same area, which is called the near repeat effect. In Amstelveen, they do burglary closely around the highway because that's a nice escape way. So all these patterns you can see in the data. And so basically, well, what would be done would be something like this.
I used to think my job was all about arrests, chasing bad guys. Now I see we work differently. We analyze crime data, spot patterns, and figure out where to send patrols. It's helps the U.S. cities cut serious crime by up to 30%. By stopping it before it happens. Let's build this market.
Of course, we didn't make a system like that, but we made maps for the police where we could say, okay, this time of the day, this month of the year, the probability of having a burglary in this area is higher than in that area. And then you can move police vehicles around such that, you know, if there is a burglar around, they would either defer their actions to some later moment or not do it at all. Yeah, so maybe catching criminals with mathematics is a bit too overstated, because if the police is there, you do burglary, you would be a really stupid criminal, I would say. But at least it helps you to stay safe longer, right? So we also did something else. So I don't know if does anybody recall this picture? Yeah, that was the landing of the airplane in the Hudson River, right? And so that was also a very defining moment, because then, well, what you saw is that people twittered about it and it went viral. This is probably one of the first tweets that went viral. And so that gives you ideas, right? Because if something happens, something like that, and people are putting that on social media, it becomes known on social media before it's known in newsrooms. Right? And so if you can detect that on social media, it would give you information about things that are happening, maybe on incidents. Yeah. So we were also asked by nu.nl if we could do this. And of course I said yes, but then, of course, then you have to do it, right? So we did. So, of course, in the newsroom, they have all these, they have information overload. What should they follow, right? So they have ANP, they have Reuters, they have all kinds of news outlets from which they get their news. So they were looking for a system that would help them automatically detect news. And so, as I said, in all these events, you have people ready with their phones, ready with their cameras, and they post directly that news event on, well, it used to be Twitter, now X, and all these other things. So what we built is a system that would automatically detect those messages, right? And so we called it real-time reporter. And what it basically did is that we built it in a time where, well, Twitter was really active, and we nowadays it's not, right? but it can be translated to other social media. So we used to get like 6 million tweets per day, right? And actually, we work together with linguists because Twitter doesn't give you this data for free. Yeah, if you want to get the whole, let's say, data hose from Twitter, then you had to pay a figure with at least 6 zeros. Yeah, so that was, well, we didn't have that, of course. So we went to linguists and we said, okay, how can you classify the Dutch language? And it turns out, with 130 words, you can classify the Dutch language. Very easy. So you just have to follow those 130 words, just keywords. These are words like als, ik, dan, maar, moet. And if you follow those words, you get almost, well, all the Dutch tweets. So we got that, and then we built a system that would detect, like, okay, which words are used at which time. Yeah, so it used to be that every Friday we had the Voice of Holland, right? So we would have a peak in all those terms. But of course, that's not news, right? Because it happens every Friday. So we learned through making the system how, well, people used which words when, right? In the morning, good morning, in the evening, good evening. And we know how many of those, right? What we also saw is that, well, we needed a spam filter because at that time, well, at high schools, people were also sending out jokes. So our system detected a lot of jokes, but that was spam to us. So we also had a spam filter, and then we clustered on the topics that we found, and we just measured the speed at which things happened. Yeah? And since we knew how words were used every minute of the day, but also last week, last month, last year, we could detect deviations from the normal pattern. And that is news, right? And so what we did is we tried that system out. Here you see a reporter from nu.nl, and here you see a reporter from ANP.nl, and they use our dashboard, and we were able to detect news before they knew it, right? So and nowadays it still happens. So if you're in a traffic jam, well, you see people behind the wheel just, you know, apping stuff and making pictures and putting it on social media. So we can detect that earlier than the newsroom. And also, when an accident happens, we can see it in our system. I used to give a presentation before a different audience, and half of the audience was not there. And then I put on my system, and I saw that an accident happened on a certain road. So I said, well, yeah, of course, they're stuck in traffic. They will probably be here in 15 minutes later. Yes, and they were, right? So that's the predictive power of such a system. And of course, if you know that, and you combine that with the ambulance data, well, then you have a powerful system to send out your ambulances. Right? There's another thing that I want to talk about, last example, and that's healthcare. Yeah? We're still young here, me included. So, but we will get older, right? And one of the things of getting old is that, well, if you see how the demographics is going to change, then you see, well, right now we have already like 1.3 million people that are old, right? So the old means 75 plus. But the projection is that in 2030, it will be 2.1 million, right? So that means that the pressure on healthcare is going to increase. Yeah, and there are other figures that really show how that works. But eventually, we will need much more nursing homes, for example, right? So if you look typically what happens in a certain scenario, it could be that, you know, one elderly person falls, then goes to the hospital, gets a hip operation, and then is sent to the nursing home. Well, in each of all these chain blocks, right, there is a problem. Because if you fall and you have to go to the hospital, there's a waiting time, even if you go on emergency care, right? And, well, waiting for an operation, there's also a delay there. And then when you have your hip operation and you have to go to a nursing home, there's also a delay there. So you see that the state of healthcare, really requires some transformations to make this process more smooth, right? So I want to look at the last station there, the assignment to a nursing home. How to do that better. So, of course, when you live somewhere and you have to go to a nursing home, you have preferences. You want it to be maybe close by, or close by, let's say, to your children, so that's such that they can visit you, right? But if you have just one specific preference, it also means that perhaps your waiting time is longer because there's no place there, and maybe somewhere else there is a spot available, right? So it's this balance that you want to take into account, like, okay, how many preferences do I have versus, well, the efficient use of all these nursing homes? And we try to study that also mathematically. It's actually quite a nice puzzle. So here you see two elderly people, and, well, with the heart, it's basically the preference. So patient A wants to go to north, and patient B wants to go to east. Well, the ideal situation is that in north there is one bed available, so you assign that person to that nursing home, and B wants to go to east, and, well, there's a bed available there. That is the ideal situation, but that does not occur that much in practice. Right? So what you do see sometimes is that, well, patient A wants to go to north, and there is a bed available, and patient B wants to go to east, but there's no bed available there. But, okay, patient B also has, like, okay, if you cannot satisfy my preference, I do want to go to south, and then, well, yeah, there is a bed available. It's your second best choice, right? But it's not your preferred nursing home. And then what usually happens is that, well, while the patient is already in south, a bed becomes available in east, and then you reassign that patient to that nursing home. Well, that's not an ideal case, because usually if someone is assigned to a nursing home, they have to get adjusted to the environment, and then moving that patient to a new nursing home, that's a very impactful event. So you want to avoid this as much as possible. What also happens is that, well, patient A wants to go to north, well, as a second choice to west, but certainly not to east, and there is no place at both north and west. And what happens is that, well, if you have to wait at home and, well, your situation deteriorates, then usually also your preferences can change. That also happens. So then maybe east, which was not discussable in the beginning, now is discussable at the end, certain days later. So here's an example situation, right? So here we see three patients. Patient A wants to go to east, preferably, right? And then west and north are okay. Patient B wants to go to north, and west and east are also okay. Patient C is actually assigned to north, but wanted to go to east. And now, well, you can say, well, that person doesn't want to go to west, so what do you do, right? What assignment is the best in this case? So in this case, you could say, well, let that patient C move to east, then, well, patient B can go to north because a spot becomes available there, and then, well, there is no bed available in east, so, well, we'll go for the second best, which is west. But if, for example, patient C wanted to go to west as a second case, then we could move him to west, then B could go to north, and A could go to east, which is a much better situation, right? And so what we did is we gathered all data from Amsterdam. There are around 38 nursing homes in Amsterdam. They can have a capacity of around 800 patients. And we also asked people, like, to give their preference and basically also mention, like, how bad, by giving it a score like how bad it is to go to this nursing home, to that nursing home, etc. Right? And we did, well, for these small problems, you can see what the optimal solution is. But of course, with 38 nursing homes, it becomes a bigger problem. So what we did is we looked at the current situation. So what is the current policy in Amsterdam is that, well, you give a preferred nursing home. If that nursing home is not available, you have to wait at home. And then after a certain time, you're sent to the nursing home where there is a spot available. And then if your preferred nursing home becomes available, you move that patient. And it turns out if you use that policy, then it takes you around 211 days before first placement in a nursing home. And it takes you 232 days till your preferred nursing home. Think about that, right? So when you get older and you need a nursing home, you need to wait 211 days. That should be able to be done smarter, right? So we tried to solve this puzzle, and we said, okay, what happens if you only have one preferred nursing home, right? Then by solving this puzzle, the number of days before the first assignment is 51 days. From 211 days to 51, if you do it smarter. Smarter in this case means sharing data, because that is something which does not happen now. Yeah, so we have nursing homes, and they own their own lists of beds, but they don't share them, right? And well, the days till preference drops from 232 to 177. If you give 2 preferences, then it just drops down to a month before your first placement, right? And well, from 177, it goes to 105. So it makes sense to now talk to the municipality of Amsterdam such that we can create a system in which we share this data and can do this, because this has an enormous effect on all the elderly people that want to visit the nursing home, right? So, thank you very much. I should introduce this in my colleges, I would say, my lectures. So what you see is that here we have a model that takes into account individual preferences, yeah, and it has a major effect on the waiting times. Yeah. And what is nice about mathematics is that, well, I talked about the ambulance, I talked about the firefighters, I talked about the police. Basically, it's the same kind of model. It's a very generic setting. Right? Also here, I can use this model also for youth care or psychiatry. Yeah? So that's the nice thing about mathematics. It's timeless and, well, in my opinion, it's timeless and generic. So even the ambulance problem, you could also use it for, let's say, the ANWB, for helping cars that are broken down. When you have data, you can make a probability map of where a car is going to break down. In summer, the probability is higher, etc., etc. And then you can also pre-move that car such that it's closer to the incident, right? And so one thing that I want you to take away today is really mathematics can have a big difference in your daily life. And I think it already does, but we don't know it all the time, right? So, but I think it starts with a foundation, right? So if there is something, if there's someone here that has connections to the government, please say to the government that they should invest in that, right? So with this message, I want to end, and thank you for your attention. So, yeah.
Across the mountain tops, I believe all will come across will